Welcome to Miss Friedman's Prezi presentation on reproduction. You will notice at the very top for our essential question over the entire unit is why is reproduction necessary for the continuation of species? Remember, a unit essential question will not be able to be answered until the very end of the unit. However, we have an essential question for the day. This question should be able to be answered by the end of these notes. That question is, what is reproduction? We also have an I can statement that says, I can explain why reproduction is necessary for the continuation of species. Therefore, if you are able to explain why it's necessary, then you have essentially answered the unit question. Before we can actually answer the unit question, we'll need to figure out the definition for the word reproduction. Now it says, why is reproduction necessary for the continuation of species? The word continuation comes from the word continue. And we know that the word continue means to go on. So why is reproduction necessary for a species to go on? As I explore the different types of reproduction and also provide you with the definition to reproduction, please follow along with your guided notes and fill them in. First, reproduction's purpose. The reproduction's purpose is to make sure a species can continue. That is directly related to our essential question. Why is reproduction essential for a species to continue? Well, now we have to learn about our definition. The definition says reproduction is the process by which an organism produces others of its same kind. So in order for a species to continue to go on and not become extinct, it must reproduce. Let's review. The word extinct means to be no more of. So in order for any organism, whether it be a plant or an animal, or even something as small as a single-cell bacteria, it must go through the process of reproduction and make more of its own kind. Otherwise, the species will not continue. Again, this can be a human, it can be another type of animal that you would see at the zoo, it could be a plant, or it could be a single-celled organism. Either way, it has to go through the process of making more of its same kind. Otherwise, it will not continue. There are two main types of reproduction. The first one is sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction requires two sex cells. In the female, it is the egg, and in the male, it is the sperm. In order for the actual process of sexual reproduction to take place, the egg and the sperm must join to form an entirely new organism. In order for them to form, sexual intercourse must take place. When the sperm and the egg join after intercourse, offspring is created. Offspring is just a fancy schmancy name for children. So in order for children to be born, that egg and the sperm from the mom and the dad, or the male or the female, must join. When sexual reproduction occurs, it allows for variations inside of a species. Variations is a fancy word for differences. So basically it allows for differences within a species, meaning individuals will look different from one another. For examples, humans. No human looks exactly like another human with the exception of identical twins or triplets. Therefore, we all look different because of the variety or the variation from our parents. Same thing with dogs or cats or even giraffes. They will all look different. Even though they might sort of kind of look the same at first, they actually are different. One other thing to mention is that there is only one type of sexual reproduction. As I said, it is sexual intercourse. The other type of reproduction is asexual reproduction. This is when one organism makes another organism, meaning a mom and a dad, or a male or a female, are not required. Only one organism is required to make another. Sometimes one organism can make plenty. When one organism makes another or makes plenty of offspring, those children or those offspring will have heredity material exactly alike with the hereditary material of the parent organism. This means they will be genetically alike, meaning the parent organism will look exactly like the children. And the children, when they reproduce, will look exactly like their children. Therefore, everyone, or everything, I should say, will look genetically alike. There are actually several different types of asexual reproduction, unlike with sexual reproduction where there is only one type. So let's go ahead and explore the various types of asexual reproduction. There are actually two smaller categories of asexual reproduction. You have different types of asexual reproduction that happens in an entire organism, and there are different types of asexual reproduction that happens in cells. Remember, all living things are made up of cells. This is something that you learned in 6th grade. So whether it is a plant or an animal, it's all made up of cells. In order for a plant or an animal to reproduce, the cells that make up the plant or an animal actually have to reproduce. So the cells will go through various processes such as mitosis, meiosis, or binary fission. When that occurs, the entire organism, again, whether it be a plant or an animal, is able to reproduce. When an entire organism reproduces, it can be called budding or regeneration fragmentation. The words regeneration and fragmentation are synonymous with each other, meaning they are synonyms. First, let's go ahead and look at the common types of asexual reproduction within an entire organism. Then we'll actually go back and look at the little itty bitty cells and see how they reproduce. The first way of asexual reproduction in an entire organism is called budding. Budding is when a new duplicate plant or animal begins to form at the side of the parent and enlarges until the individual is created. This is very common in plants. In order to kind of get an idea of what it would be like, think about it in a human. Although this does not happen, but it would be as if you grew at the side of your mom or dad and stayed attached to them at the hip for the rest of your life. Probably not very fun. Here's a picture of a hydra budding. You will notice here's the parent, right here, and the offspring is growing off to the side of the parent, and it's attached to the side of the parent. You have more growing over here as well. Again, this would be similar if a child were to grow out of the side of mom or dad and never leave them. Uh-oh, sounds pretty crazy. Make sure you draw that picture on your paper so you have an idea of what budding looks like. The next type of asexual reproduction in an entire organism is regeneration or fragmentation. This is the ability to restore lost or damaged tissue organs or limbs. If an organism loses a body part, it will grow back. It is a common feature in invertebrates like worms and starfish. Starfish have arms. If an arm breaks off, they can just regrow that arm. Therefore, it's called regeneration because it will regrow. Same thing with worms. If you cut a worm in the middle, which I do not recommend, you should not be doing, but if you end up cutting a worm in the middle, it will actually not die. Both ends will regenerate. Here is an example of budding, and I apologize that it is out of place, but this is another example of budding, not necessarily regeneration. Here we go with our regeneration. Here you have the starfish. If any of these limbs were to fall off, get stuck under something as a starfish is trying to get away from the predator, and it breaks its arm off, it will be able to regrow it and stay alive. Next would be asexual reproduction in cells. So now we're talking about the itty bitty bitty cell itself. Remember, the cells have to reproduce enough times before an entire organism can reproduce. So now we're working backwards. We started out as in the entire organism, and now we're going into seeing the little parts of the organism called cells. The first type of asexual reproduction in a cell is called fission or binary fission. Binary fission is the process of the division of the organism. Basically, the cell will divide. It will break off and divide into two cells. Those two cells will then break off apart from each other and become 4 cells. Those 4 cells will each break into 2 and make 8 cells, and so on and so forth. So basically, the cell just pinches and divides into 2. And that process is called binary fission. Here's the process of a paramecium. A paramecium is a single-celled organism. Remember, I said when I refer to an organism, I can be talking about an animal or a plant or an organism that is simply 1 cell big. So in order for this 1 cell to make 2, in order to reproduce, it breaks off into 2 pieces. You can see this process happening right here. Again, make sure you're drawing all pictures that go on your guided notes. Here's another picture of binary fission. Notice it's splitting off into 2 cells. Next is a process called mitosis and meiosis. Both of these types are asexual reproduction, and both of these reproductions occur within cells of an organism. Because they are more complex, you're actually going to watch a separate presentation on each of these processes. Although mitosis and meiosis are forms of asexual reproduction, meiosis is actually a process that is linked to sexual reproduction. However, I want to stress it is not sexual reproduction. Meiosis actually has to occur before sexual reproduction. And again, both of them are types of asexual reproduction. Therefore, you should now at this point be able to answer the essential question for the day. However, I do want to note one item, just to reiterate. Asexual reproduction will have children or offspring that are exactly the same, and sexual reproduction, the children will be different, or the offspring will look different. They will look different and they will be different. Okay? So going back to that essential question, you should be able to answer at this point, what is reproduction? You should know the purpose, and you should know the definition. Thanks for watching. Please rewatch this video as many times as needed.